Today, we venture into one of the most terrifying and haunting stories in the entire history of Spider-Man. The moment when Peter Parker himself, the hero we have always trusted, always admired for his sense of responsibility and compassion, lost everything. A moment when Spider-Man was no longer Spider-Man, but transformed into something far more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. A true monster. New York City was submerged in silent darkness, but instead of the usual honking of cars and the familiar urban noise, the streets echoed with savage growls, the sounds of flesh being torn and bones being crushed. Atop the Empire State Building, beneath a cold and indifferent moon, we see a towering creature covered entirely in black fur and razor-sharp spines. It had 6 massive arms, each ending in claws capable of shredding steel like paper. And the most horrifying detail of all, across its chest, torn and soaked in blood, were the remains of a blue and red Spider-Man suit. The creature's eyes were no longer the familiar white lenses, but blood-red orbs burning with madness and an uncontrollable, ravenous hunger. And in that moment, we realized a horrifying truth. That was no ordinary monster. That was Peter Parker, Spider-Man, who had lost himself completely. And that was only the beginning of the nightmare known as Man-Spider. Before diving deeper into this terrifying event, we need to understand what drove Spider-Man, one of the strongest-willed heroes in existence, to the very edge of complete corruption. His own irradiated DNA had betrayed him in the most brutal way imaginable. The Man-Spider saga first appeared in the classic animated series Spider-Man, the Animated Series, during Season 2, and was later reimagined and expanded across various comic book publications, particularly under the pens of writers who favored exploring the darker dimensions of the character. This was a reality where Peter was no longer a young man struggling to pay rent and dating Mary Jane. He was at the peak of his confidence, having fought and defeated countless dangerous enemies. But it was precisely that overconfidence that led him to make a fatal mistake. Peter's own voice echoed through the pages in a monologue of anguish and regret. I thought I could control everything. I thought my power was a gift. But I forgot the very first lesson Uncle Ben ever taught me, that with great power comes great responsibility. And I was too arrogant to realize that sometimes power is not something you control. Sometimes it is power that controls you. And when it began, I could not stop it. I became the thing I had always feared most, a monster. This was the starting point of Peter's tragedy. His motivation was not to save the world, but the most primal fear any human being could face, the fear of losing himself. This transformation did not come from an external enemy. It came from within Peter's own body. Do you remember the origin of Spider-Man's powers? A radioactive spider bit Peter, injecting into him a strand of mutated DNA. For years, Peter always believed he had only received the benefits of that bite. Strength, speed, wall crawling, spider sense. But what Peter never knew, and what even scientists like Curt Connors never anticipated, was that the DNA of the spider was not simply an upgrade. It was a time bomb. It was like a primal instinct, a symbiotic consciousness sleeping within every cell of his body, waiting for the right moment to rise up and seize full control. When I tell you that Peter Parker could become a monster even more terrifying than Venom, that is no exaggeration. Venom is an alien entity attempting to mimic humanity. But Man-Spider is the true nature of a human being, when stripped of all moral restraint and rational thought, a creature acting purely on predatory instinct. All right, and this is the part that will genuinely make your skin crawl. We will now follow the linear sequence of Peter's horrific transformation, alongside crucial flashbacks that explain the scientific and psychological origins behind this tragedy. In the laboratory of Dr. Curt Connors, also known as the Lizard, but this time, Connors was not the enemy. He was an ally, and also a victim of genetic mutation. In a desperate attempt to find a cure for himself and for others affected by mutation, Connors had developed a new serum, a catalyst designed to stabilize mutated DNA. But as you already know, in the world of Marvel, experiments with the most noble of intentions tend to produce the most catastrophic of consequences. Peter, as a friend and as a patron of Connors, had voluntarily taken part in a trial. The idea was simple and noble. If this serum could stabilize the lizard's DNA, it might free thousands of others from uncontrollable mutations. The experiment took place on a stormy night. Thunder and lightning roared outside the laboratory windows. Peter removed the upper portion of his suit, revealing a body covered in scars, souvenirs from countless battles. Connors injected the serum into Peter's vein. At first, nothing happened. But then, within seconds, Peter's body began to convulse violently. His pupils dilated, his muscles swelled and contracted in unnatural ways. Blue veins rose across the surface of his skin, and most horrifying of all, from beneath Peter's skin, hard black bristles began to grow, piercing through the epidermis like thousands of needles. Connors cried out in panic, desperately trying to administer an antidote, but it was already too late. Peter flung him across the room with a single swipe of terrifying force. Peter's roar filled the air, no longer a human sound, but something caught between a scream of agony and the shriek of a giant insect. He smashed through the window and plunged into the night, vanishing into the downpour. The atmosphere at this moment was not merely tense, but a torment of the senses. For Peter, the world had never been a quiet place. His spider sense had always warned him of surrounding dangers. But after the serum activated his mutated DNA, that sense was pushed to a level beyond all control. Every sound became as deafening as a freight train. Every light blazed like the sun itself. He could smell the blood of every living creature within miles, and worst of all, he felt a hunger he had never known, a primal, consuming hunger that drove him to hunt, to tear, to devour. This was the most unbearable sensory overload a human being could ever endure. Peter's mind, once filled with jokes and optimism, was now just a small, drowning voice in an ocean of wild instinct. He struggled to cling to his last remaining memories, the face of Aunt May, the smile of Mary Jane, the promise he made to Uncle Ben. But all of it was swallowed by a single command surging from the spider DNA now seizing control. Survive, hunt, dominate. This is precisely the moment we need to cut to an important flashback, stepping back into the past to explain why this transformation was so deeply terrifying. Many people mistakenly believe that Man-Spider is simply a larger version of Spider-Man. That is like saying the Hulk is just a big green guy. In the original comic book source material, particularly under the pen of writers like J.M. DeMatteis, the concept of the monster within Peter has always been a theme explored with great depth. We saw it in the story Kraven's Last Hunt, when Kraven drugged Peter, buried him alive, and Peter had to claw his way up from the grave using nothing but his most primal strength. We also saw it in the story The Other, when Peter faced death and was reborn with new abilities, including retractable stingers that could shoot from his wrists. But Man-Spider is the absolute peak of all those fears combined. And the crucial point, the one that few people notice, is the connection between Peter and Dr. Connors. Connors, in his identity as the Lizard, had always been locked in battle with a primitive reptilian instinct that sought to dominate and destroy humanity. Connors once spoke words that sent a chill through all of us regarding the fate of those who carry mutations. Peter, you don't understand. When you are the Lizard, you are not simply a monster. You are a new species, and that species has no desire to share this planet with humanity. It wants to replace humanity. The most terrifying thing is not the strength of the monster, but the fact that it has a mind of its own. It is intelligent, it is ruthless, and it believes that what it does is right for the sake of evolution. This monologue from Connors carries enormous weight. It raises a question about the true nature of Man-Spider. Is this simply a raving beast, or is it a superior form of life that views humanity as prey and regards Peter Parker as nothing more than a cocoon from which it was born? Let us reflect for a moment. Why is Man-Spider more terrifying than even Venom? Venom, at its core, is a personal enemy. It hates Peter Parker and wants to destroy his life. But Man-Spider carries no personal hatred whatsoever. It does not hate Peter. It does not hate anyone. It simply no longer needs Peter. It views Peter's humanity as a useless shell to be shed. Compared to other moments when Peter lost control, such as when the symbiote took hold of him in Spider-Man 3, he merely became more aggressive and arrogant. But with Man-Spider, there is no aggression at all. There is only the cold silence of a perfect predator. It does not speak, does not threaten, does not negotiate. It only acts. And its actions, as you will see in what follows, are pure nightmare. Now we arrive at the absolute peak. The moment that I personally believe stands as one of the most brilliantly executed depictions of terror in the entire history of Spider-Man. The hunt between Man-Spider and the people Peter loves most. After vanishing from the laboratory, Man-Spider made no attempt to hide. It began constructing an enormous nest atop St. Patrick's Cathedral, right in the heart of Manhattan. Its webbing was no longer the thin and delicate white strands we knew, but thick ropes of black as tar, clinging to the surrounding buildings and blanketing an entire city block. Hundreds of innocent people were trapped inside massive cocoons, suspended in the air like flies in the pantry of a monstrous spider. The police and even the SWAT units were completely powerless. Bullets struck Man-Spider's body like drops of rain, its outer chitinous armor too thick and hard to penetrate. This was the moment the people Peter loved most stepped forward. Mary Jane Watson, the woman who had always loved Peter unconditionally, regardless of every danger, climbed the building alone and walked directly into the heart of that terrifying nest. She carried no weapon of any kind. She carried only her love and a desperate belief that Peter was still somewhere inside that monster. The scene that unfolded was truly heartbreaking. Mary Jane stood there beneath the moonlight, her tears mixing with the rain, and cried out, "Peter, I know you are still in there. I know you can hear me. Please, please come back to me. You promised you would never leave me, Tiger. Please." In that moment, Man-Spider froze. Its 6 arms, which had been preparing to tear apart another victim, suddenly trembled. Its blood-red eyes flickered, and for a fraction of a second, we caught a glimpse of Peter Parker's brown eyes, filled with tears. This was the emotional climax of the story. The battle was not between Man-Spider and another superhero, but between monstrous instinct and the love of a human being. But tragically, the spider DNA was far too powerful. It interpreted Mary Jane's love and vulnerability as a threat. Man-Spider roared and swung one arm, hurling Mary Jane away. She struck the wall hard and fell unconscious. That shock alone, the act of witnessing himself harm the person he loved most, triggered something deep within Peter's mind. This is the most powerful part of the story, because we are allowed to witness the true strength of human will. Inside the mind of Man-Spider, a fierce psychological battle erupted. Peter saw himself in an infinite dark void, bound by enormous black chains. Standing before him was Man-Spider, no longer a mindless beast, but a conscious entity with its own voice, cold and laced with contempt. "Why do you resist? I give you strength beyond every limit. I give you freedom from all responsibility, all suffering, all loss. No more ailing Aunt May, no more unpaid bills, no more grief over those you have lost. Only power, only survival. Why would you ever want to return to that weakness?" Peter, in the form of his spiritual self, sank to his knees. He recalled every face, every lesson, every moment that had defined who he was, and then he lifted his head, his eyes blazing with a remarkable intensity, and answered, "You are right. Being Spider-Man means enduring suffering. It means sacrifice. It means facing loss. But that is what it means to be human. That is what separates us from the beasts. I do not need your power to be perfect, because it is precisely the imperfection, the love, and even the pain that makes me Peter Parker. And now, get out of my head." In that very moment, from outside, Connors arrived just in time with the antidote. But what truly defeated Man-Spider was not the antidote. It was Peter's will. When the needle pierced the monster's body, it was Peter's spiritual strength that amplified the effect of the cure. Man-Spider's body began to contract in agony. The spines fell away, the black fur shed like ash, and the 6 arms slowly withered and disappeared. It was a reverse molting, agonizing and raw. And when it was over, Peter Parker, bare and covered in blood, lay collapsed on the rooftop, cradled in the arms of Mary Jane, who had just regained consciousness. He had won, but the price had been coming within a breath of losing himself entirely. It ended in the heavy silence of a hospital. Peter survived, but the scars, both physical and psychological, would remain forever. The consequence of this event was not the destruction of New York, but the fracturing of Peter's very soul. He had been forced to confront the truth that a genuine monster existed within him, and that the line between hero and monster was as thin and fragile as a single strand of web. Whether this ordeal was truly more dangerous than any enemy Spider-Man had ever faced, the answer is yes, but in the most profound way imaginable. Enemies like the Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus are threats from the outside. Peter can fight them, defeat them, and lock them away. But Man-Spider is an enemy from within. It is a part of Peter himself, and it will always be there. Its danger lies in the reminder that even the best and purest among us carry a hidden darkness. Peter Parker may save the world by day, but by night, he must fight the nightmares of his own making. That is why, in the stories that followed, writers always found ways to revisit the lingering trauma of this event. Through Peter's recurring nightmares, through the moments when he unconsciously clawed at the walls in his sleep, or through the look of quiet fear in Mary Jane's eyes each time she noticed even a small wound on him. This became the foundation for deeper internal conflicts. As Peter found himself asking whether he deserved happiness at all, knowing that he was a potential danger. Would there come a day when Peter grew too old and too worn to hold his will together, and the monster inside would rise one final time? Here is a teaser for you. In one alternate reality, it did, and no one survived. To wrap things up, never assume you fully understand what someone else is going through. Even the strongest heroes carry inner battles that we cannot see. Peter Parker is not simply a boy who was bitten by a spider. He is a man who fights every single day to hold on to his humanity in the face of a primal instinct that wants to consume him whole. And that is the truest definition of courage. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face your greatest fear head on and to win. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think? If the day ever came when Peter could no longer hold Man-Spider back, is there anyone in the Marvel Universe who could stop him without having to kill him? Venom, the Hulk, Wolverine? Or do you believe this tragedy is the very reason Peter always tries to keep his distance from the people he loves, because he is afraid that one day he might be the one to hurt them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. If you want to support us further so we can keep producing in-depth analysis videos like this every week, come visit us. Thank you for being here with us, and remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Peace out.